Hello, everyone. Welcome to this Radcast with Elizabeth and Jamen. Elizabeth, how you doing down there in California?
I'm good. I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great up here in Seattle. And welcome everyone who's watching this recording. We have been having really a fascinating conversation about the different sort of spaces that we're moving through as we grapple with these, end time issues and threats. And as we grapple with, being in action, being in grieving, and how, that there's kind of a back and forth. There's a time when I'm out on the front line doing my thing in action, and other times when I'm just curled up in bed, just grieving and feeling, depressed and sorrowful and regret, remorse, all these things that come up. So anyway, we were just having a great conversation about that, and I really love your sharing, Elizabeth. So I'm going to go on mute and check in with you, and then we can just kind of go back and forth.
So
actually, I'll be unmuted.
Perfect.
Go ahead.
Perfect. So just to kind of recap what you and I were talking about before we started to record, that I think, sets the stage, if you will, for where we want to go next today, is you were talking about, feeling all over the place and feeling, like you were doing things and you were optimistic and you were depressed and hopeless and, feeling a lot of sorrow and confused and, and also in the middle of everyday life, like, what's for dinner?
Yeah.
And I was kind of reflecting that this seems to me to be a really important place to be for a lot of reasons, even though it's not comfortable to be all over the place. That in this time we need to be efficient. We need to be able to move from one sort of state of being to another with some fluidity if we're going to be masterful in this time. And all the things that you describe are realities. There is, a great importance to taking action, whatever it might mean for anybody else. And for you, it's kind of clear you have a number of pathways that you've already sort of hacked, open and are pursuing. So you can step onto one of those and do something, and that feels really powerful and good to be taking some action. On the other hand, when you lie down to take a nap and the sorrow of our situation rushes in on you, that's really hard. It feels very powerless. It feels very vulnerable. And my feeling is that is just as important a place to spend some time to cultivate, to be open to, even though it's not fun. It's not as protected. It's harder often than taking action, but it is what is at the root of your action, and it is a truth that is central to who you are in this time, is that you feel that deep and kind of multifaceted sorrow about where we are. And that experience of taking something that maybe starts in the heart, I think, but I think we express it often, with our language, with our head, with our actions, and allow it to live in all the dimensions of our being makes it much more powerful. So I was saying to you that when we first started this process, I was a little uncomfortable with it. I felt a little self-conscious, and I was working really hard to, craft my language. And I don't think I did a good job, but that's where I was focused. I was thinking, I was totally in my head. And as we've done a few of these, I've realized, no, that's not actually what I want to put on the table. What I want to put on the table really is my heart. And if I want to put my heart on the table here, I've got to be coming from it. And that means I've got to be feeling how much grief I feel on behalf of the earth, on behalf of other animals, on behalf of you know, all the potential that we have carried and not actualized. I mean, I have a broken heart. That's the truth.
Yeah.
I have a
Yeah.
broken heart. And that broken heart is at the root of my sitting here talking with you. It's at the root of what I write about. And it has power. And so does your grief. And so, anyway, just you know, it's not very entertaining to talk about. And yet it is an absolutely essential part of this process. And I think, going back to what I was saying in the beginning, that being able to move from that place of emotional connection with our lives in this moment in time to action or ideas, to maybe a refined understanding that merges some of the two, to new action or new feelings. You know, we don't have forever to stay focused in one arena or another, and being able to move back and forth and weave a presence that is that comprises all those aspects of our being, from, you know, our head to our heart to our actual physical being, is a really powerful offering.
Yeah. Yeah, and you know, one thing I'm getting clear on is, you know, what we're recording here and publishing is not entertainment per se, and it's certainly not for everyone. I see it as, you know, it's now morphing into, you know, a grief, you know, group grief support, a grieving support group of sorts, as well as an action support group. And the different kinds of action, you know, in the direction of preparedness, in the direction of prevention, that whole dialectic. So anyway, this is what it is. Obviously, it's not for everyone. So, you know, we don't take offense if people don't like hanging with us on these topics, you know. And for those who love it, welcome, 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 welcome. You're not alone, you know. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you know, I assume you've encountered some of this, Jamin, but I was so stunned. I wrote an article that was in Counterpunch, I don't know, I think it was like the beginning of March, so a few months ago. And, you know, it was fairly dark. It was, you know, I mean, the suggestion was that there's plenty that we can do, but we can't change the course of what's already moving along very rapidly, or rolling down the other side of the mountain very rapidly. And so what is still in our hands is how we live this time. And I got so much of a response to that. It's totally shocked me. And what was most moving for me were people who were saying very simply and with relatively few words, I'm just really grateful because this is what I have been feeling, this is what I have been knowing, and to see it out there, to have my own experience affirmed, is just so incredibly important to me. And like I said, I hadn't really expected that, but I think that that's a big thing that we can offer here. I mean, I think most people who are going to be watching us or joining us are people who've already kind of made a leap, but I do think that having a community, a place, you know, last time you were talking about micro tribes and tribes, and, you know, maybe we're an entire branch on the tree with a lot of different sub branches and leaf clusters.
Yeah,
You
totally.
know, and we may not see what's happening here and what we need to do with it from the same perspective, because we all come from different experiences and backgrounds and gifts, but to be able to sit in a space with other people who also feel what we feel.
Yeah.
And not, not to sit around and, weep necessarily, because that's only part of the story. And it's also something that we all deal with in our own way. I mean, some people would like to sit around and cry, and that's cool. Some people like to cry on their own. Some people, use art to process how they're feeling. Some people use words. Some people ultimately use action. A lot of people use action to process their grief. But to acknowledge that this is a place where that's almost a given. It's understood. That, we couldn't possibly, I don't think, be in this place, whether we're dropping into that grief or not, but we couldn't possibly be in this place where we're looking at what we're looking at without feeling sorrow.
Yeah. You said something that was very inspiring to me, many things actually, but one of them was the whole, kind of the branching out from this conversation. And since this is one of the first conversations that'll be up on howtochangetheworld.org pretty soon, and the very nature of howtochangetheworld.org is anyone can create any conversation they want and invite whoever they want, including inviting the world and just making it totally public. We, by being one of the first and the first to really get into, the topic of grief, in as deep a way as we are, and then how that interplays with action, et cetera, I think this can become sort of like a highway off of which off-ramps can go and say, ooh, yeah. I like all you guys are saying, and here's where I want to take it. Let's start the permaculture movement now, and I mean right now, right? So while you guys are talking about all that stuff, rock on, keep doing what you're doing. We're starting this parallel conversation over here about permaculture now, right? Or clean out the oceans now, or other forms of action. So there'll be all those sort of actions. Others that'll go deep into the grief, others that'll go deep into optimism, others that'll go deep into wherever they go. And that's beautiful. Let 1,000 flowers bloom, right? Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I've been thinking, since we talked last about, about that image of, the different micro tribes and what it is that encourages us to set our micro tribe against another micro tribe. And I, I mean, this is a little wooey and trite, but I do believe it has to do with a belief in a scarcity of resources. And there is a reality that, we encounter at some point. But I thought about you and me. So you are much more inclined to take some action to stop this process. And I am much more inclined to accept an inevitability and to say, so what do I want to do with what is still here? You want to bet on the future and give it your all. I want to say, all bets are off, and I'm going to work with what I've got. So we can sit here and we can talk. We can bat things back and forth. We can find areas of agreement and disagreement, and it's all, just lovely. But what happens, what could happen that might set us at odds with each other? Because, right now it's very much, it's not entrenched. Our conversation is not entrenched in any kind of struggle with one another. And all I can think of is, okay, so what if it comes down to this? There's a limited number of resources, dollars, energies, time And if I take some of those resources for what I believe is important, then that, in theory, takes away from what you believe is important. That holds you back. And, we were talking about how the left all over the world has been fragmented by this kind of dissension. And has not been as successful as it might be in uniting people. And that really, really concerns me. So then the question becomes, okay, so if we're talking about how to change the world, and we're saying, here's a conversation, but we're inviting people to take a path off of it in a direction that moves them and excites them. There's no real limit there, right? There's room, there's enough for everybody. So that's cool. That's really nice. But someday we may have to confront what we do when there's a choice to be made, and what happens not only to what we think, but how we feel. What feelings are extant, which ones are working when I say, stop, it's not going to happen, Jamen. Will you please get a clue? We need to focus on now, or we need to focus on preparing for the end, not trying to prevent it, because you're never going to succeed. I mean, that's not where I am, but I might get to that point, or you might get to that point. Will you stop being negative? How will we ever save the world if you keep saying it can't be saved and taking all the resources to die or something, right?
Here's a metaphor that comes to mind, an imaginary metaphor, is imagine we're like watching some great movie that's just got some wonderful 2.5 hour movie. It's just epic. And we're kind of in the last 20 minutes of the movie. And you and I are sitting there eating popcorn and just enjoying the heck out of it. And, you're looking forward to the last 20 minutes. And then all of a sudden I get up, and while the movie's and let's just say, for the sake of argument, it's playing on television or something. So it's like, we've only got one shot at it at the next 20 minutes of the movie. And I get up, and with the remote, I start messing with it and saying, gee, I wonder if there's some way to choose your own ending and extend the movie and make it go longer than these 20 minutes. And you're saying, will you shut the hell? You're interrupting the because you just want to sit there and enjoy the last 20 minutes of the damn movie. Right?
What would happen if, Romeo, didn't die?
Yeah, exactly. And I'm trying to change the ending, but you see the two fundamental. I'm just trying to make up a funny metaphor.
Exactly.
That essentially, crystallizes. You want to enjoy the end of the movie, right? And I want to change the end of the movie. I'm not willing to just sit back and eat the popcorn and drink another beer and enjoy the end of the movie when I can change it.
And we don't have two TVs.
That's right. We've got one TV.
Got to share the TV. Yep.
That's right.
Exactly. And up to a certain point, you can be speculating. Well, what if they lived happily ever after?
Totally.
And I would be saying, you know what? I've read this play before. I know they both end up dead. It's a tragedy. So, let's enjoy the tragedy, because we do enjoy those things.
Yeah.
That's sort of a diversion, but yes, that is a decent analogy. And so it's a challenge, but I feel like that's a really important challenge. And I think that when we look at that analogy, we're looking at attachments that both of us have to certain ways of being alive, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, you are saying, I will not be defeated. I am going to, I am going to have an impact on my world. And that's how I control my life and feel like, I have some clarity about who I am.
Yeah.
And me, I'm like, I like to know I like to know where the parameters are so that I can work within them and make the best choices for myself. So, this is not high-minded. This is like almost primal stuff in a way, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
This is about survival in a certain emotional fashion. It's how you survive as Jamin, and it's how I survive as Elizabeth. And that's why I think sometimes, the contention gets really intense, because
Yeah.
because we're not acknowledging that, you're like, hey, it's just a movie, let me give it a try, we could have a happy ending here.
Yeah, and you look at that as so psychotic, so disconnected from reality. So it just like at some level, it just pains you inside that I would have that reaction to this.
No, you know what? It just frightens me. I mean, I'm not really frightened, but there's a place in me that could, if I wasn't being really conscious of it, could become very frightened and threatened, because um, I I want to I want this space in which to live my life that I can understand. And I might not really enjoy that, the parameters that I'm seeing, but I'm seeing them. That's my realism, is like, we are going down here. And so I want to take every moment that I have to prepare myself in as many ways as I can, as well as to really fully like soak in every single moment. I find I have so many moments these days where I'm just watching the birds. I'm watching the birds. I'm watching the birds. And it gives me so much joy. And then sometimes I think, why am I just sitting here? And, but partly it's because I know that I can't watch the birds when I'm 90. I'm not going to be sitting there watching the birds when I'm 90. I can do it now because this is what I have. And it's like a goad for me. It helps me be my best and live my best. And um and your approach feels risky because it offers hope that maybe it won't happen this way. So for me, and you were speaking the other day about going to a support group, near-term human extinction support group, and having people get upset with you, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And it strikes me that there's something analogous there,
Well, like imagine it's like a support group of people who got terminal cancer and they accept it. And so they go to the support group to just kind of share their end times together. And then some, wacky snake oil salesman comes in and says, hey, I've got something that I think might help you cure your cancer. And then you can live a life that you love without cancer. Why the hell have cancer? And they're just like, dude, we're so beyond that conversation. You know, these could be stage fivers who just accepted, and so again, I'm just making these analogies to kind of, for me to better understand, that other perspective. I was going to say your perspective, but I think we're kind of encompassing, now that we brought in the support group, a bunch of people's, kind of shared perspective. And what's fascinating here is, we talked about these bifurcations. There's, the what I call the Guy bifurcation. Those who basically believe in Professor McPherson and his message, and those who don't. Right. Then after the Guy bifurcation, those who believe in Guy and his message, then comes the Jamen bifurcation, and we're literally talking about it in these terms. Michael and I are on our own separate series where we're geeking out on strategy, right? And so just for in to put it in simple terms, Elizabeth is on one side of the Jamen bifurcation and Jamin is on the other, but we're on the same side of the Guy bifurcation, and that's what creates this common ground. And I hypothesize that the safest, most creative, coolest thing we can do is, as these micro communities bifurcate here, there, and everywhere, right? And really the way I see it is kind of like a bunch of on-off switches that are all in a big stack. And on any particular issue, you can either be on this side of the bifurcation or off, meaning you're on the other side of the bifurcation, right? So like on the Guy bifurcation, those with the on switch believe in Guy and what his message is. And then comes the Jamen bifurcation, and you're either on or off. You're off and I'm on. Anyway, and there could be like a whole bunch of these. Well, they don't have to go in that sequence like that. Like anyone can just come up and flip their own switches any way they want and say, okay, this is me, or this is how this is how I represent myself. And instead of on or off, it can be in the middle. It can be, I don't know. I simply haven't even looked at that issue yet. So I don't know whether I'm on or off, right? And anyway, so all those different combinations, any, I guess 3 to the nth power, if there are n of them, 3 to the nth power different possible micro communities. Now, some of those will have 0 members because, like, for example, if you're on with the Jamen bifurcation but off with the Guy bifurcation, well, I don't know, that's kind of an exotic mix. But anyway, I'm just saying some of the micro communities will have 0 members. Others will be chock full of people going rah, rah, rah. And where we meet in the middle with respect to one bifurcation or another bifurcation, right now we're talking about essentially, enjoying versus preventing, right? Not, enjoying it, for lack of a better word. Enjoying what time we have in the fullest sense of enjoy, versus preventing the cancer. So, here we are just kind of sharing about where we're coming from, and also showing each other, hey, I empathize with where you're coming from. Here, does this metaphor help? And you're like, yeah, that's it. All right. Or whatever. So I think this is so healthy. I mean, this is like, Palestinians and Israelis coming together and saying, hey, let's talk. And I know we're probably not going to resolve everything by talking, but let's give it a start.
Well, let's give it a start. And I think, as you were talking, what was coming up for me, Jamen, was that going back to the movie on the TV and the last 20 minutes, right?
Yeah.
I could feel really robbed by you if you started changing the channel or looking for another ending, right?
Exactly.
And you could also feel destroyed by my insistence that we go with the original story, right? That you don't get a chance to have your say about it and to do your best, whether you find another ending or not. And so it's that place that really fascinates me, because I think that it is that place where I feel robbed personally, like something has been taken from me by you, or you feel like I'm trying to destroy your energetic life, your beingness on this planet. I am squashing you by insisting on something. That those are the places that as human beings, we have rammed into those places over and over and over again. And I think they are a large part of how and why we find ourselves having this conversation. And so what I'm thinking about is so we may not be able to get the outcomes that we want. I mean, we all probably at some point or another have had to and will have to, on even grander scales, compromise what it is we want. So I may have to say, okay, I know the story. I know how this is going to end, or I've got a pretty good idea. So
there you go again. Anyway, carry on.
But maybe I say, okay, so Jamen, you go ahead and look for a new ending, that makes you happy. But what really matters, I think, for a lot of us, what really deeply matters is to be seen. And so we play out all this stuff on a superficial level, but underneath, I want to be seen as someone, I don't want to be seen as dark and negative and determined to see tragedy, because that's not what I'm doing. I'm trying I'm trying to live the best that I can live and do the best that I can do in this life. And that's what you're doing too when you're looking for a new ending. You're not trying to rob me of anything. You're trying to be the best that you can be. And I'm trying to be the best that I can be. And if we have the capacity to stop looking at the actions and see underneath them to both the motivations, which are about, being ourselves, being as much of, divinity and form as is allowed us, with all our human foibles. That feels different to me. I don't know how it feels to you, but if I can sit there and say, okay, so this is, your need to actually be the best that you can be. And this is my need to take care of myself and offer what I can offer. Then the decision about what happens with that remote control loses its predominance, right? And
Yeah.
maybe there's a place where we can turn off the television for a little while.
Well,
I don't
yeah.
know, but but I think there's a place where we can see that we have so much in common, even though we may have a different desire about the ending of the movie, or different need, not a desire, but a need. And
Yeah.
if we can do that, within our micro tribes, within our, branches, maybe even, with some people who are on another branch, and I think it translates really easily, if you will, to people who are in total denial.
Yeah. Yeah, because here's the thing: we're relatively high up on a tree, and we're in the same big branch, shall we say? We're just on parallel branches off of that. No, it's not to underplay what the difference is, but really to kind of emphasize how much really we have in common, and that common ground gives us a place to come together and build from there. What are we building? We're building empathy, understanding. We're having this conversation publicly in a way that others can listen to and participate in. So that's a gift. And I think we're also modeling on a broader scale. We're modeling good behavior, ways to, we're modeling a new culture. Go ahead, Elizabeth.
Well, no, I was just going to say that the ability to use our minds as well as our hearts or our souls or whatever to connect with each other, to be able to see and to analyze, but also to feel and to have a channel that moves between those two is something, and to be able to articulate it in the end. That's something that's uniquely human. We don't exactly know what other animals can do in terms of their, abilities to understand and communicate. I suspect it's far, 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 far more complex and greater than we would ever give them credit for. But leaving that aside for a minute, I think, we are human beings. And so this is something that we know actually works in this world, is being able to see one another. And we don't do it very much, not on a deep and consistent kind of way. We may do it with people who are close to us, or we may do it under certain circumstances, but this is like a fire that's been lit underneath us that says, so, what was this species about anyway? And one of the things, that we have, or a couple of the things that we have that are gifts, that are skills that we're talking about, is, your ability to envision something fantastical, amazing, beyond the scope of normal human thinking, but that exists in all of us, that ability to transcend. And that's one piece of the extraordinariness of human beings. And another piece is the ability to actually make a choice to be conscious in the moment. And on top of that, I mean, even more extraordinary is the capacity to look at one another and see those differences and understand that they are not foundational. We are all coming from the same freaking place, and to be able to see that under duress. Now that, to me, is the apogee of human life. And so this is our chance to do that. And
totally. What a beautiful thing. What a beautiful thing. And if we look at it like, here we are at the ice cream shop, and you happen to choose vanilla, and I happen to choose chocolate. And, this is how we're responding to this particular circumstance, even though I might believe that chocolate is the only thing that can possibly save us right now. And Elizabeth, how could you possibly not choose chocolate? And you could say, because I'm dying, Jamen, and I just want to enjoy vanilla one more time. And I'm like, how could you do that? Right. And my eating the chocolate might somehow interfere because now we're not enjoying the vanilla together, and, et cetera, et cetera. So, it's just, wow. I mean, it just opens up so many spaces. But the very fact that we can just have this conversation, and I look forward to so many conversations happening in parallel on so many topics, because as we build out this framework of the bifurcations and the middle grounds and the dimensionality of it and all the micro tribes and all that, I can just see amazing conversations happening across, boundaries, right? Where, who knows what's going to come up of it. But the fact that we're recording it, I think, in my mind, this is the beginning of the congealing of cells together, of, going from unicranial to multicranial. The fact that we record it, because these recordings are contributions to the collective memory. And how much intelligence is memory? Memories of things that we learned, memories of stuff that we put together and figured out. Aha, now I know how to do that. Collective, but you see, unicranial memory, unicranium memory to multicranium collective memory.
So, and I would add to that there's, I think I lost it. Well, first of all, I want to go back and say that also, in addition to the chocolate and vanilla, there are the people who are at the steakhouse. Now those are people I could get really judgmental about, right? They're eating a large piece of a cow. And, for a whole host of reasons, I could go into a place of anger or judgment and condemnation, like, oh, it's your fault. In theory, I mean, it's tempting. I have to say, it's tempting. But for some people, if they're looking at the end of the world, they're going to want to eat a big steak.
Exactly.
And that is going to be their expression of what they need, and how they take care of themselves, and how they get through, how they take care of their business. And so I'm thinking there's got to be some place where, although I might really feel badly for that cow that is being consumed, I want to be able to be in a place where I say blessings to you for your chocolate, blessings to the cow eaters for their steaks. I have to be true to myself and eat my vanilla right now, but your eating chocolate doesn't take anything from me.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, if you can allow me to eat my vanilla and totally love it, then we're actually maybe, I mean, and this is, okay, so this is weird. So the collective consciousness that you envision, maybe that comes from going to the root, which is where we're really all coming from the same place.
Yeah, we root down, because like even the ice cream shop analogy was for me a possible synthesis
Right.
of, that brought us together at a higher plane. Hey, we've chosen to go to this ice cream shop together. Let's respect that each of us is going to choose our own flavor. And there's the
Mhm.
synthesis,
Right.
right? Or there's a possible synthesis, however poetic. And so maybe there is a grand synthesis that basically says, hey, you know, even the guy who's, chainsawing through the last 100,000 acres of virgin rainforest, old growth rainforest on Borneo, right? And the people who's eating at the steakhouse and the Republicans who are trashing the Paris, whatever, that all of us are actually able to root down and find our common humanity and our common compassion, our common empathy, and our realization that, hey, none of us chose to be here. At least, well, some people believe that we did, and I actually believe that we chose to be here at some level. But anyway, here we are. Bottom line, here we are. We're on the spaceship together. And we're trying to survive, we're trying to create meaning, we're trying to find meaning, we're trying to uphold our identity while our world falls apart, taking whole chunks of our identity with it, potentially transforming us. I think, as we root down and find that, look, we're all a bunch of scared monkeys, and the forest is on fire. What do? We're kind of scrambling, and we're huddling, and we're judging each other. And maybe something like that is the grand synthesis, a profound sort of empathy for all of us, including ourselves and you and everyone. Just an appreciation of our humanity, a loving of our humanity, and a collective realization that, wow, what a horrible, destructive place our humanity has taken us to. And we're now in a state of confusion. Somebody's stomping on the anthill, right? And chemical signals are just flying all over the place from ant to ant, but it's pandemonium for a while. And I think part of the synthesis is, hey, it's pandemonium for a while.
Well,
So
it is. And so how do we respond to that? How, like, do we add more fuel to the fire, as it were? My daughter, who's 20, said to me the other day, using human brilliance to get us out of this mess is like trying to cure cancer with cancer. And there is a certain homeopathic thread there that, we might want to consider. But I think what she was saying was, we can't keep doing the same things that we've been doing and expect a different result. If we, because we have brought human brilliance to bear, we have created this civilization. What is it? What does Guy McPherson call it? A heat generation machine or something like that.
a heat engine. The
Heat
civilization is,
heat
yeah.
engine, right? Exactly. So that is the result of a certain aspect of our human capacity, our human ability, our human nature, that has created that. Nothing else created that. The rivers didn't create that. The stones didn't create that. We can take credit for having generated this situation. Climate deniers aside, the dire nature of the current situation is on us, and mostly on our brilliance. I mean, the combustion engine, brilliant, right? Holy moly, how much we have enjoyed it in various ways, and all it's brought to us. But it's brought us to our knees, and so what I see, and maybe this veers a little bit from some of our analogies, but what I see is that if in fact we are going to be in the middle of pandemonium, which I don't imagine there's really any other likelihood, that we can approach that with the same attitude and expectation that has gotten us to that pandemonium. Or maybe, and so here's where I'm the crazy optimist. Maybe at least some of us can meet it from a completely new vantage that says, yes, the people who are chainsawing the last of the forests in Borneo are my sisters and brothers.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, you know, it's, you know, an idealistic trope in a way that's been, you know, with us forever, but we rarely do anything with it.
Yeah, that's where I was kind of wandering earlier in search of the grand synthesis, and I think what you just articulated is the grand synthesis. We're all brothers and sisters, and we're all scattering about, and you know, accidentally or in some cases intentionally stepping on each other's fingers and toes. You know, as pandemonium ensues, and so one grand synthesis is, you know, that hey, we're all brothers and sisters, and let's all just really have empathy for each other, whatever we're going through, whether we're chainsawing the last 100,000 acres of Borneo or whatever. And and by the way, when as you were talking about that, another and also what your daughter said, another metaphor came to mind. It's Evel Knievel on his supercycle, right? Barreling towards the edge of the Grand Canyon where there's a, you know, little ramp, and he wants to jump to Grand Canyon. All right. So he's now at a point where, and all this happens in a split second, but he gets a message through the microphone in his ear inside his helmet that says, hey, Evel, two things you need to know. Number one, you're going at a speed now that you cannot stop. So don't even think about braking now, right? Because you'd end up at the bottom of the canyon for sure. But also, you may not be able to make it to the other side, right? So the two schools of thought. One is for Evel Knievel to, you know, give it a little more gas, get off the ramp, and then just do kind of like this very poetic spreading of the arms, letting the motorcycle fall beneath him, and then he's just accepting his death and maybe meditating or praying. Or if he's Jamen-like, he's going to say, and just give, you know, yes, let's use this humanness that created this stupid, crazy situation in the first place. Let's max out on it, right? Max out that credit card and just see if we can make it to the other side, right? And here, making it to the other side would be achieving, you know, this techno utopian future scenario where we're able to shade, you know, dial down the heat of the sun and get these carbon sequestration planetary projects going on and preserve those last 70,000 acres of rainforest in Borneo and, you know, stop the bleeding, take care of the patient. Using what? Well, using that same Evel Knievel human, you know, techno wizardry and brilliance that got us into this quagmire in the first place. So Evel Knievel has his options, and anyway.
Well, and, you know, and we can, you know, I can take that apart. I have a, you know, I have a different understanding of that particular analogy, and I would, I could point to some places where I think it's pretty weak, but that's, but I think, you know, there's something about, you know, that is really much more interesting to me about finding the way to say, again, you know, I'm not really happy that you're eating a steak. That doesn't make my heart happy, for a lot of reasons. And yet, it costs me too much to go into judgment. And, you know, I could say the same thing about, you know, making it over the Grand Canyon. I mean, I'm not too worried about it, to be honest with you. I don't think you're going to make it over the Grand Canyon. So I don't want to engage in a lot of argument about it because I think it's a wasted argument. But if you do, then there's a whole new set of things to talk about. But, but I want to, ultimately, what I want to say is that spirit, which says, give it more gas, see if you can make it over, that's about believing in human capacity to overcome odds. And I would suggest to you that I am not suggesting anything different than that. I'm just suggesting a different vision of what it looks like. So in that sense, maybe we are, because I am more focused on the process than the outcome. And you're more focused on the outcome than the process. But I think what we're talking about is tapping into everything that is extraordinary that we have access to, so that we can be the most, the best, the lightest, the truest, the most authentic that we can be. And, maybe that means surrender. Maybe that means defiance. Maybe that means embracing difference and change, and maybe it means seeing if you can outrace it, and create something new. But there's something here in our disagreement where there is absolutely core common ground, and that is what feels rich to me right now.
Totally. We're brother and sister who with the core common ground that we see that our planet is dying. Right? And it's taken so long to get to that point where we have, brothers and sisters who are at the same place where they see that the planet is dying, right? And what do we do about it? Well, Jamin's trying to resuscitate Mother Earth, and some people can take that as a great offense. No, we're all part of Mother Earth. We're all dying together. Let's, carry forth this process with love and honor, and et cetera, et cetera. And, get your hands off the corpse and stop trying to resuscitate it.
Well, and what I would say there is, it's really important to grieve, and that is a powerful response, as powerful as trying to save, and maybe, my experience is formed by my experience, and my perspective comes out of it. And honestly, when I was 30, my best friend, my partner, died of cancer just before I was 30. He had cancer for 4 years. He had lots and lots of procedures, surgeries, radiations, chemotherapy, et cetera, et cetera. And in the last week of his life, he was at Mass General Hospital, and he had all the heads of 5 departments were his doctors. They loved him. He was very charismatic, and they wanted to save him. He was a young man, and and there were a couple people who were willing to look at the fact, a couple of doctors, I should say, who were willing to look at the fact that he was dying. I knew he was dying. I knew he was dying for a long time. But, 2 days before he actually died, the head of orthopedic surgery came in, trailed by, all of his students who were, taking notes. And he came to see Brad, and he looked at him and he said, I think we need to do a scan to see how far the cancer has spread. And this guy's nurse said to me, like, we all can see he's got, 24, 48 hours left. We don't need a scan. So what they did actually was they had to give him a general anesthesia to straighten out his body, because he had so much cancer throughout his bones that he was curled up in a ball. So they gave him general anesthesia to put him through a scan. And of course, they found out that he had cancer everywhere. And then, of course, he died under the general anesthesia. And then they resuscitated him, put him in intensive care, and then, they let him die a day later. But so I watched that. I was right there. And, and there were DNR orders that were ignored. And I saw that his short window of time, and that was partly his choice, but his short window of time to come to terms with his leaving his body was very much disrupted by somebody else's need to save him. And he was far beyond the ability to make a competent choice. His brain was, I mean, he was demented. So this doctor couldn't bear his own failure. He couldn't bear looking at it. He couldn't bear losing Brad. And he just dove in there with everything he had at his disposal. We can figure this out. And it was clearly, for me, an attempt to avoid his feelings about it. He felt failure, he felt loss, he felt sorrow, he felt grief, and he couldn't stand it, so he had to keep acting.
And so he was addressing his feelings, not the need of the patient. Precisely.
So that's just one of my formative experiences, but I think it describes a lot of, if that was my death, that's the last thing I would have wanted to have happen to me. I would have wanted to be taken home, because we were trying to take him home. We were trying to put him in hospice. They just started hospice then, and, give him a little comfort, give him some morphine, and, allow him to choose his moment.
Totally.
And respect that there were things that were outside of all of our control, but there were a few things that were still in our control, or in his control. So anyway, I think, it's not that I think you're crazy or you're doing anything that's wrong, but I don't want to miss the moment. And this is just me. I don't want to miss the moment, the last few moments, for myself or for other people or for the planet. I don't want to not be fully present because I'm worried about, putting a Band-Aid on it and keeping it going and having another shot. So that's just, and I'm sharing that story. I'm sharing it with you. I'm sharing it with anybody who's listening, because I think we've all got that kind of stuff in us. Those stories that shape our perception and our actions. And the more that we're in touch with those, the more that we honor those and acknowledge them and maybe even share them, the easier it's going to be able to say, oh, okay, of course you're gonna rev up the engine, Jamen. That is part of your story. That's what you have to do to really honor what you know about yourself and about life. And so have at it, go for it. I'm crossing my fingers. Hope you make it across.
Yeah, thank you. By your sharing that story about Brad so many years ago, and what I'm really seeing as a commonality that's coming forward is, I look at the metaphors, analogies, and I'm saying, hey, what about this? What about Evel Knievel? What about the movie analogy? What about this? We're through sharing our stories as they come to us or as we bring them from our memories. This is a way for us to grapple with this new situation that's in front of us. And I think this is just a very human thing. We combine other stories or parts of other stories and say, well, is it like this? Or wait, maybe it's more like this. And one thing that's very clear is this is helping us, Jamen and Elizabeth, to understand each other. Now, if we abstract it away one level, and consider that everything that we're saying here is now part of the collective memory, one level of abstraction away says that this micro tribe, the basis for this micro tribe and the basis for this other micro tribe now have some connections in the collective memory that help these two bases understand each other. Kind of like that ribosomal network of fungi or mushrooms or bacteria, you know what I'm talking about, all that stuff underneath
mycelium, yes.
Mycelium, yeah. So we're essentially, what we're doing is we're building the mycelium between otherwise disjoint and disconnected bases for microtribes, because the tribes and the individuals and the personalities, including our own, are at some level irrelevant. At another level, they're deeply relevant. Hey, this is me, and that's you, and wait a second, you know, so we're dealing with both our individuality and with the collective intelligence that can transcend individuality, and really
nicely said. Yes. Yes.
thank you. And what we're doing is we're making these contributions to the collective intelligence, to the collective memory, which I assert that over time, especially as these are transcribed and you have ontological search and everything else, you know, will form a really nice, you know, framework that connects, you know, why not have all these connections between the different bases for the microtribes. I'll have to think of a better word, better expression for it. But the bases of these different, you know, sectors.
Mm-hmm.
Sectors of perspective is what they really are. You know, it's, you know, when I'm coming at it from give it to gas, you know, that's not Jamen, that's Jamen's perspective in this hyper pressure, you know, time sensitive moment where everyone's watching, and Jamen has to be the hero because that's his identity and ego and so many things coming into play. Whereas, hey, if we get Jamen into a safer space and he's calm and meditating and he's done ayahuasca and he did the 10-day retreat where he didn't talk and he was in the woods, you know, okay, now Jamen, let the real Jamen come forward, and I'll be like, oh, I'm coming from a whole different place. So, you know, it's not Jamen, it's perspective. And so each of these bases for microtribes, as I've been calling them, really are the bases for perspectives, for a particular perspective, including time pressure, including emotion, including all kinds of stuff. And as we grapple with this stuff, we're building, you know, however crudely at first, you know, just using our crude words and our crude tools, we're building this mycelium network that helps these form connections and form whatever. And because ultimately the grand synthesis of all this is this one sort of Gaian, you know, perspective that encompasses all of it. That's the very definition of the collective intelligence. It's all the above, right? And yes, you can transport around to different perspectives within the collective. You can feel what it feels like to be Jamen, you know, on the Evel Knievel motorcycle, because we will have found a way to articulate all those emotions, all those feelings, perhaps summarized in stories, or perhaps in long volumes of PhD theses upon PhD theses. Oh, sorry, did I say theses? You know, that really supposedly were down, but then in the end you get lost in all of it. So that's why stories are so cool, because they encapsulate for us. But anyway.
Well, and I need to stop hanging out, as it were. But I want to say one more thing, and that is that Gaian perspective, that comprehensive, radical, collective intelligence, maybe it's not attached to form. You know?
Yeah.
Sometimes we have to pass through a painful and small portal to get to the vastness. So who knows? Who knows? Anyway.
Wow.
I look forward, Jamen, to picking this up and going to the next, I don't know, the next crossroads with you.
Absolutely. It's so much fun.
Yes.
Yeah. All righty. Well, all right. Well, let's wrap for now.
Okay.
And thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you.
Thanks to all of our audience, whoever you are and wherever you are in time and space time. And onward. All right. We'll see you all next time.
Yes.
Thanks, Elizabeth.
Thank you.